In this episode, I'm going to share how I find and engage podcasts that are looking for guests. You want to go on podcasts, you figure it's easier to find podcasts who are looking for guests rather than just do cold outreach to tons of different podcasts. And that intuition of yours is correct. I've done it. And I have three methods, mostly two. One gives me 70% of my appearances, another gives me 20%, the last one gives me 10%. And I use these to go on podcasts. Last year I went on 30 podcasts in 3 months as a guest. And in this episode of The Edward Show, I'm going to share how I do it. I'll give you the breakdown right now. 70% of my podcast appearances came from AIPodcastMatcher.com. All these links will be in the show notes, in the description. AIPodcastMatcher.com uses AI to match you with podcast hosts who you would be a good fit for. So you fill out a profile, you say the topics that you are interested in, hosts who are relevant to you see your profile, but you are automatically matched with 3 to 9 of them a day. Every day, 3 to 9 matches a day. You don't do any cold outreach. The system matches you with podcast hosts. And then you can choose to continue or to pass. Same with the host. Again, 30 appearances in 3 months, 70% came from AIPodcastMatcher.com. The second is Matchmaker.fm. I use this to go on about 20% of my podcasts. This one has filters for finding shows to go on, and the hosts use filters for finding guests to have on their shows. And then the last one, 10% of my appearances came from word of mouth. Podcast hosts know a lot of other podcast hosts. And oftentimes, if you do a good job as a guest, if you are an entertaining and engaging guest, the host will say, you have to go on my friend's show. And oftentimes, you can climb the ladder of appearances and go on bigger and bigger shows through this. Those are the three platforms: AIPodcastMatcher.com, Matchmaker.fm, and then word of mouth. I'm going to give a little bit more of a breakdown now onto how these platforms are different. And then I'm going to share why I like going on podcasts as a guest and how it is beneficial to me. All right, so AI Podcast Matcher, this one is not free. You have to use the paid tier on this. Matchmaker has a free tier. And with the free tier, I was still able to go on a decent amount of podcasts. AI Podcast Matcher requires that you use a paid tier. However, for the amount of podcasts that you can go on, it's inexpensive because you can go on a lot of podcasts through this. I've done it. Something else about AI Podcast Matcher that's cool is it has a leaderboard that refreshes monthly, giving everybody a fair chance at being one of the top guests. 1 month, I think my top was I got to number 2 on the platform as a guest. And I've just found that it has a lot of very active hosts. Matchmaker.fm, so the way that it works is with the free tier, you get 10 cold messages to hosts who want guests. You get 10 cold messages to send a month. And even after those 10, hosts can cold message you. And there are really legitimate shows on Matchmaker.fm that have large audiences. There's a forum, so you can solicit hosts by posting in the forum and see who viewed your profile. Oh, and both of these platforms, they both prefer remote guests. So you don't have to travel to go on podcasts. The cons with Matchmaker.fm is I found that there are fewer hosts than there are on AI Podcast Matcher. And with Matchmaker.fm, really with both, but more with Matchmaker.fm, I encountered some hosts who attempted to charge me for an appearance. Never, ever accept this. Don't accept this. These people are scammers. This also goes against both platforms' terms of service. Don't accept this. I'll tell you what I don't do and what other guides recommend. Other guides recommend cold emailing shows. I think that is such a large waste of time. It's 2024 now. There are platforms that pair hosts with great guests and vice versa. Great guests with great hosts. Cold emailing has such a low conversion percentage unless you're doing it through automated means. And that's cool. That's cool if you're doing that. But most people are not. Most people are like, oh, I like the show. I think so-and-so would be a great guest, or I would be a great guest. Such low conversion percentages. So that's why I personally use these platforms to go on so many shows. And the other reasons, I'll give the other reasons why this benefited me. So obviously, going on podcasts is good for distribution and building top of mind awareness. Top of mind awareness just means when people think of my niche, they think of me. Podcast hosts are very connected. Like I said, they connect you with other podcast hosts and more sought after people who are also guests on their shows. It's just a great way to build a network. You get a never ending stream of content to repurpose for social media. You can use reusevideo.com. Actually, people who listen to the show, they know that reusevideo.com allows me to syndicate my videos from TikTok to every other platform, but it also has functionality for turning podcasts into mobile video. The reason I started doing this was I wanted backlinks. And I figured that going on podcasts would be an easy way to get backlinks. And it is. It's an easy way to get backlinks, which boosts the SEO power that my websites have. And then finally, going on podcasts validates authority of your brand, authority of you. You share on LinkedIn. Here's me on this podcast. Here's me on this podcast. Here's me on this podcast. It makes you look a lot more legitimate. And it makes it look like your brand is in demand. I wanted to keep this one short. I made this episode primarily for people who are searching and trying to find ways to go on podcasts as a guest and who are looking for podcasts who want guests. Because from my SEO research, I found that this is something that people are searching for. So that's why I made this episode. I also made this episode, actually, I was having a conversation with my friend yesterday and I was telling him about how I went on all these podcasts and he got really excited to try this. Because he's just like, I just want to start. I just want to go on podcasts. I don't care if they're big or small. I want to get a foot up. I want to have appearances to reference. And he got really excited about this. And so I figured it was a worthwhile topic. I've talked about this before in my newsletter, edwardsturm.com/newsletter, and in my articles all over the place. But this is, I think, the first time that I made a dedicated episode about this, targeting the keywords that people are using to search for this. This is episode 181 of The Edward Show. This is my daily growth hacking podcasts. These are hacks for going on podcasts. Hope you try them. If you do, let me know. Hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you again tomorrow. Bye now.